Hey everyone, Simon here, and this is part 2 of Decoding Relationships. Today we're going to talk about your personal handicap. Next time I will cover the full soulmate indicators, so stay tuned for that class. If you want to find out more about the complete compatibility protocol program, check out the text below this video. It's a standalone 12-week program that even offers certification in the full compatibility protocol. But even without that, we're going to share a lot of useful tidbits and stuff that I've discovered in the course of the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months of research into this topic. So let's dive right in. So who is this handsome fellow that we're looking at here? This is none other than the actual historical Cyrano de Bergerac. I thought he would be a good poster boy for this topic, which is the personal handicap, because he was, at least in the play by Edmond Rostand, Cyrano de Bergerac, which for my money is one of the great literary works of all time. Shakespeare, whatever, in my opinion, they're on par, and I like Cyrano myself better. Pendant que je restais en bas dans l'ombre noire, d'autres montaient cueillir le baiser de la gloire. In the shadow below, I told my story while another claimed its kiss of glory. It's beautiful. And the whole play is rhyme. The whole play is a work of art. It's not just one line. It's the whole play. It's like that. Anyway, so you can see here that this the actual historical figure actually was very short-lived, 34 years old. And so today we're going to talk about looking at your chart to see what your personal handicap is, and do you have the karmic sort of predisposition for a long-lasting, stable relationship, or is the karma, more mixed? And so there are essentially two things to cover. So we're going to dive right in. The first is your actual skills that you come in with, relationship skills, and we can look at that, and there's a specific protocol. And the second is relationship karma. I put that in quotation marks because a lot of us have different ideas of what karma is. Karma in the Vedic tradition, at least as I understand it, is a set of experiences that you are likely to go through based on your life map, and your chart is your life map. I have a course called Decoding Your Life Map, and there are 3 levels of karma. Fixed karma, which is like pretty much you're going to have to go through it. Like I'm 6'3.5". That's fixed karma. It's hard to change that unless I cut off my foot or something. Then there's mixed karma that is still kind of fixed, but if you work hard, you can change it. Like, my body weight or muscles. If I work out really hard and diet for 6 months to a year, I can change the size and weight and composition of my body. And then there's non-fixed karma, things that require very little attention and they change. Like I decide to paint my nails red. Well, if I decide to and I go to the store, boom, they paint them red, or I just go to wherever and I have red nails. Easy to change, right? So there's 3 levels of karma. We won't get into that right now. So karma is much more complex than most Westerners think. Oh, that was karma, dude. Oh my God. You see that? A pigeon pooped on you. Karma. No, that's one aspect of it, but there's a lot more to it than that. So what are relationship skills and how do we identify them in a chart? Very interesting. There's an ant crawling on my computer. Ants represent Saturn because of their industriousness and work ethic and organization and discipline, and they clean up the junk, right? The detritus of people. This is a solitary ant, so he might be Rahu too. Okay, so we'll talk about Saturn and Rahu then. So let's launch into that and see how I judge the personal handicap. Um, so the whole scoring thing aside, don't worry about the scoring. It's a way to sort of compare and contrast. Let's say you have really good compatibility with someone and it's plus 20 points, but if your personal handicap is minus 30 points, even there, it's going to be a difficult relationship. But let's just move on to the actual techniques. And if it's 40 or higher, join an ashram. Say goodbye. Although I will present a few remedies at some point. Okay, you twisted my arm. At the end of this class, ow, stop twisting. At the end of this class, I'll give you a couple of potential remedies if you have a really difficult personal handicap. Like I do, by the way. And of course, why would I like this guy, Cyrano? Because simpatico. I haven't translated a whole part of that play from the French to the English. Anyway, so here we go. So if in your chart, if the sun, moon, and Venus, now remember the four cornerstones, Lagna, ascendant, sun, moon, Venus. These are in your Western chart and Vedic chart, these are the four relationship cornerstones. We can also look at Mercury and Jupiter and Mars, but they're less valuable to us. Unless they rule the seventh house, and we'll get to that in a minute. So if sun, moon, or Venus are in houses 6, 8, or 12 of your chart, that is a liability. Okay, you have moon in the 12th, it's going to make it more difficult. Moon in the 8th, Venus in the 6th, those are difficult positions. And I give them minus 1.5 points. Then, if those are additionally, if they're weak, so by being debilitated, combust, Venus combust, only Venus can be combust, or the moon is combust, meaning it's very close to the sun, or the moon is weak. We don't say it's combust. A dark moon, those are pretty much the only instances. So a dark moon, a debilitated sun, moon, or Venus additionally gets minus 3 points. But if they are strong by being in their own sign, the moon is bright, you get positive points for that. So it is actually possible to get a positive handicap, okay? And some people have that. And as I mentioned in the last video, like Barbara Bush has a positive handicap, meaning any relationship she enters, she's likely to A, make it work, B, have that relationship be a long, stable one, because simply of her skills and that she brings into this lifetime. All right, now I bring in the outer planets. Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto are, if they are connected very tightly to one of these cornerstones, meaning your ascendant, sun, moon, or Venus. And by connected, I mean conjunct or opposite within about 5 degrees, a maximum of 10 degrees, okay? So those of you in the Vedic tradition who don't use Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus is excitement. And when it's tight with one of your cornerstones, it makes you always look for the fresh thing. Oh, that looks cool. Uranus is Vata personified. It's a turbulent gas planet, actually, I believe, and it has an eccentric orbit, or it's tilted to its side. It's kind of eccentric, and relationships come fast, but they also leave fast. So when Uranus is in play, you're constantly looking for excitement and stimulation. When Neptune is in play, you're looking for the ideal. And that can be a liability because it makes it difficult to live in the real world. And then Pluto is all about intensity. Like every time we kiss, it has to be a 10. Every time I look into your eyes, it has to be this deep, meaningful glance. After a while, I mean, you kind of avoid looking at that person because they're going to want to engage so intensely with you. So you kind of just, hi, honey, I'm home, but just, I just want to sit on the couch and watch TV. So that's Pluto. And they need intensity. The sex has to be a 10 every time. So anyway, so if those are very tight with your cornerstones, it's a liability. It's a handicap. Now, it can make for very intense and exciting relationships, but for long-term, I'm talking about long-term, it's a bit of a handicap. And it can be transformed into an asset if you're aware of it. If you're aware of your intensity or if your need for excitement, and you could build that into your relationship. So let's say you have Uranus, your partner doesn't. Like Uranus on your moon or your Venus or your ascendant or your sun. So we're going to counsel your partner to be a little more spontaneous for you, okay? So that they create situations that are exciting for you. And you go, oh, I'm in love with you again now. Like you got that rush of blood all of a sudden. And your partner won't necessarily know that you need that, but your chart shows it. Anyway, all right, so now Mr. Ant here is insistent that we talk about Saturn. Okay, so Saturn aspecting your four cornerstones. You have Saturn with your moon. That's a personal handicap. Now, that can create a sense of seriousness about relationships, but it also creates a sense of loneliness, a sense of isolation, a sense of people don't understand me, a sense of the cup is half empty. Well, the world is the way it is. What's the point? You know, that kind of thing. So every time Saturn aspects your sun, moon, Venus, or ascendant, you give it points. Now, the closer it is, so within I use the 7.5 rule, which again is in Light on Relationships by Hart Defoe, which means that if Saturn stays with your moon or it's aspecting it with its 3rd or 10th aspect, and it's within 7.5 degrees, that gets a full -4 points. If it's 7.5 to 15, it's a little bit less, and so on. So by the same light, and the more things that Saturn influences, the more kind of a party pooper or wet blanket it'll tend to make you. If Saturn influences your sun, moon, and ascendant, for example, you're kind of a Saturn person. And so your partner will have to know that. They'll have to understand, it's really useful to understand your partner's handicap, not to hold it against them. Oh, are you being Saturn again? But to help people, well, you can do that and bring reflection, but to help them come out of it and to help them see it. Okay, Jupiter gives a plus points every time it touches one of your cornerstones. And then Rahu Ketu, which we talked about in the video on soulmates, the previous video I made with the black shirt, because it was Saturday when I made it. And today is Sunday. So this is actually more Mars color. It's a little lighter red, although in the camera it appears to be darker, but we'd want something a little bit darker for the sun. But it flies. So Rahu Ketu can join with the cornerstones, sun, moon, Venus, ascendant, negative points. Why? Because it makes you a little bit eccentric. It makes you a little bit of, well, it can make you an idealist. It can make you, Charlie Sheen, Rahu in the ascendant. You're a bit of a weird bird. And it can work for you, but understand that people may not understand that. People may not understand you. So it can be a liability for long-term stability, which is what we're looking at here. Doesn't make you, we're not talking about you being a good or a bad person. We're talking about long-term relationship stability. Now, there is something I call Maha Yoga, which I've made a whole different video about. You can look at it separately on YouTube. That gets -5 points. So I'm going to skip that one. It's called Maha Yoga, Rahu Ketu in relationships. And then this is very, very useful if you want a quick snapshot of what are the skills that this person brings into the relationship, okay? So we're still on skills. We're still on this thing. What are your relationship skills, okay? So the sun, moon, and the sun, moon, Venus in house 6, 8, 12, strong or weak, everything we just talked about, okay? But now to look at the skills, look at the relationship between the ruler of your first house and the ruler of your 7th house. You can do this in Western as well. I mean, this is a Jyotish specific technique, but look at the Lord of your ascendant, the Lord of your 7th house. What is their relationship? Because that indicates what is your relationship to the other in general? Like, how do you relate with people? If they are square, 90 degrees to each other, there's a tension aspect. It's not a deal breaker. Squares can be dealt with, but squares are what I call my way or the highway. So you have to compromise. Okay, I'm going to do the dishes, but you do this. Or, you work, I take care of the kids. The square is kind of that kind of relationship. Or are they trine? Are they 5'9"? A square is 4'10", by the way, in Vedic astrology. So what are the good aspects? Conjunction is good. Opposition is good. In Vedic, Carl Jung found this out as well, and we'll talk about him in the next video, that oppositions create magnetic attraction, opposites attract. The 6-8 relationship is negative. When one planet is 6 houses and the other is 8 houses away, Shadashtakam. That is the opposites repel and want to rip each other's throats out aspect, okay? So the ruler of the first, the ruler of the seventh. And you can see I give more points to that because that is a pretty, it's a good snapshot of how inclined you are to, or really not even how inclined, but what the skills that you bring into relationship are, okay? And there's little specific ones, like if you have 3 or more malefics in the kendras, not counting Moon or Mercury, obviously, it can be a negative thing. If you have something called Punarbhu, which means to be again, it's the runaway bride yoga. All these yogas really should have modern names. Punarbhu is a nice Sanskrit name. Bhu means to be. It's where the word bhava comes from. Bhava means state of being, and it also means house, astrologically. That's the Western translation. But bhava is something that rules a state of being. Punarbhu or punarbhava means to repeat a certain state again and again. And what is that state? That's a state of relationship. So the person with punarbhu, which is Saturn and Moon connected or associated or aspecting each other with the 7th house involved. Either Moon rules the 7th, Saturn rules the 7th, they're in the 7th, one of them is in the 7th. Somehow, 7th house, Saturn and Moon, those 3 things have to come together. And especially before age 30. So this is like a kind of Shani dosha. You know, Kuja dosha, the blemish of Mars, this is like a Shani dosha. And it creates some difficulties, especially before age 30. After age 30, it's a little bit easier to deal with. Okay, so those are some of the relationship skill handicaps. Now, there's something I call divine masculinity and divine femininity, which are based on the Maha Yogas. And there's other astrologers who sort of use this. I'm going to skip those and go to the karmic outlook. So what basically this is, the closer, just to review this, the closer you have to this Maha Yoga, which is the yoga that says a person will be very popular, likely go into, be a very popular person. So they can translate that into politics. Mrs. Gandhi had it. They can translate it into show business. They can translate it into being the CEO of a company and whatnot. The closer you are to having that yoga, it's a rare yoga. It's not a common yoga to have. Then one of the implications is that you'll have a good or, a status quality spouse. Anyway, so but let's keep going and let's dive into now the karmic outlook. So we talked a little bit about skills. And by the way, it took 12 2-hour sessions to actually go over this whole protocol. So even the personal handicap, we can't cover in like 30 minutes, but I think you can get the gist of most of it here. All right, let's go into relationship karma. Karma comes from the root kr or kri, which means to do. So when you ask someone, what do you do in Sanskrit? Bhavan kim karoti, kim karyam karoti. Sir, what do you do for work? Then tell them what you do for work. Aham adhyapakaha asmi. Aham chatrah asmi. I'm a teacher or I'm a student, etc., etc. Anyway, kri comes from what do you do? So karma is the fruit of past activity. So it's not punishment, it's not anything, it's just the ball you've set in motion at some point in your life. Or, as I mentioned in the last video, it's your DNA, which you've inherited genetically from your ancestors, or a combination of both. Okay, so one way to judge karma is to look at the seventh house. And there are special, well, even before we judge the seventh house, look to see if there are yogas. For example, yogas for renunciation. Look, if this is supposed to be the chart of a monk, it's going to be hard to have relationships. You know, Einstein had yogas for renunciation. He had a hard time because his mind was always half into thinking about the universe and God, and if God wanted to travel at the speed of light, what would that be? He's not thinking about sending flowers to his honey. So these yogas for renunciation are inherently not romantic, at least not in a personal sense. So these are just the classic ones you'll find in any of the classic texts. If the moon is in a sign of Mars in the Navamsha, or even Saturn, and aspected by Saturn, the person becomes a renunciate. And so on. You can read these. If the weak moon is conjoined with the Lagna Lord, the person will become a miserable renunciate. Saturn in the ninth house can be an indication, especially if it's unaspected. 4 planets in one house, particularly the 10th, or in one of the Kendras, is indicative as well. So yogas for renunciation, Kema Druma Yoga also. And if you don't know what these are, look it up. Kema Druma Yoga. Not good. That's the time to join the ashram yoga. That's when a person is not inclined to really have social intercourse, to interface with society. Okay, but these yogas are rare. So aside from these yogas, in most of the classics, Parashara, Paladipika, and so on, they list something called the 12 good and the 12 bad yogas, meaning the combinations for each of the houses. So I'm going to share this here. And that combination says, and we're just going to do it for the 7th house, okay? If a house is aspected or occupied by a malefic, let's do the malefic yoga, because each house has a possible benefic yoga or malefic yoga. If a house is aspected or occupied by a malefic, and its ruler is also afflicted, either by being in houses 6, 8, or 12, by being combust, debilitated, or with multiple malefics, and no benefics influence the house and ideally its ruler. This is a lot of criteria. But if those criteria fall into place, you get what's called the bad yoga for the given house. So let's just do this. Let's just do this as an example. Let's look at the 7th house. Now, I've set this chart up deliberately. All right, so the first is that house aspected by malefic? Well, yes, look, Saturn aspects, and I'm sorry I'm doing the North Indian. Let's see, I can do both here. Give me a second. Boom, how's that? How you like me now? All right, so Saturn aspects the 7th, okay? Who else? Mars also aspects the 7th, okay? So criteria 1 is met. Criteria 2, the ruler of the 7th has to be somehow afflicted. So the ruler of the 7th, Mercury, where's Mercury? Well, look, Mercury's combust, 2 degrees from the sun and on the Rahu-Ketu axis, right? Mercury's not doing well. So criteria 2 is met. Criteria 3 is no benefic should influence that house. Does Jupiter or Venus influence the seventh? No. Do any benefics influence the ruler of the seventh, Mercury? No. We have a clear, this is a clear yoga of the bad kind for this house. So the bad yoga for the seventh house is called Dushkriti. Dushkriti means sinner. So the person will have loose morals, blah, blah, blah. Now you don't take it all personally, but there will be difficulty in relationships. So if this person is going to have a significant handicap, right? Karmic handicap based on this. Now, what if they have the opposite? Let's see if we can find an instance where we have the opposite, the positive yoga. So you can study these 12 yogas. You can buy a copy of Paladipika or Brihat Parashara Hora. You can buy Hard Defoe's Light on Life, where he talks about them in the yoga section. Any good text on Jyotish will talk about these 12 positive and negative yogas. So how about now? Let's take a look at this. Look at this situation. Now let's look at the seventh house. Is it aspected by any planet? Look, it's aspected by two benefics this time. So we have now benefics. What about its ruler? Well, its ruler is in a positive house. Its ruler itself is unafflicted by malefics. It's only with another benefic. So it fulfills criteria 2. And criteria 3 is, are there any malefics now aspecting the house itself? No. And even the ruler is free. So this is a clear case of the opposite yoga called Kama Yoga. So folks, this was just a matter of minutes or maybe an hour difference between the birth time. This is the same place, and see how much time makes a difference. This person born 15, 30, minutes before the other will have dramatically different relationship outcomes. The person born 30 to 60 minutes later will have dramatically different relationship outcomes. One having them more on the extreme positive side, the other more on the extreme negative side. This is why birth time is important. And this is why you can't also judge everything just from the moon. The lagna is all important. Okay, so these yogas are indicative of a personal handicap. And of course, if you have the positive yoga, it says that you will be devoted, you will never look at another's wife or husband, and yada, yada, yada. So we consider those yogas as well in the compatibility protocol. And if you don't have one of these yogas, then just kind of add up how much good is in your seventh house, how much bad, how much good is in your first house, how much bad, because that's your personality, and kind of weigh it. Okay, like I have a whole point system here. Then we could look at your D9. But the point is not to necessarily go through this whole thing. If you want to go in depth, go into the rabbit hole and really figure out how to do this for each and every one of your clients, join us in the compatibility protocol. I think you'll enjoy it. We have a good time. But let's go to then the next stage, which I promise, which is some level of remediation. Okay, I have this yoga, guilty as charged. What can I do? Well, first of all, understand that the good or bad yogas will manifest during the period of those planets. So let's say you have this chart, but you're not running Saturn or Mars or Mercury. Why? Because Saturn is one of the players in the yoga. Mars is one of the players in the yoga, and Mercury, the ruler of the house, is one of the players. Let's say you're running Jupiter or Venus. Well, then that stuff is more in the background. Now you are going to run the sub-period. You're going to run Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, then eventually Jupiter, Mars. So you can never really get away from it. But if you're not running the major period, you're still okay. If you are running the period of one of these planets and the seventh house is afflicted, This becomes a question of, do we strengthen the ruler of the house? Because that house is also called a Madaka house. A Madaka, a killer house, is not good for longevity if you are of the age where it can be difficult for you. So if you're 15 and your chart shows that you have Purna Ayu, a full life, you don't have to worry about Madakas. But if you're 95 and you're running a Madaka, you may not want to strengthen that planet because it'll have more of the Madaka influence. Anyhow, so what we want to do is bring strength and dignity to the house involved. So if it's the first house that's afflicted, strengthen the ruler of your ascendant, either through wearing a gemstone. It's hard to go wrong by strengthening the ruler of your ascendant. If the ruler of your ascendant is Jupiter, it's hard to go wrong by wearing a yellow stone or a yellow sapphire, or giving a yellow kurta or a sari to a guru, a teacher, or a priest or a priestess. A yellow necktie, and doing it every Thursday, or feeding the, I'm going with this Jupiter theme here, or feeding Jupiter's animals. Pigeons are considered Jupiter animals, so go feed that bird. Go feed that bird every Thursday at least, but do it every day if you can, with the intention that you are, with every morsel you give, you're giving a bit of that karma, of this Dushkriti Yoga karma, assuming you want to get rid of it. Some people with Dushkriti Yoga don't mind it. They're playboys or whatever, and that's the lifestyle they want. But if you want, more permanent kind of relationships, then so strengthening the relevant planet, either the ruler of the 7th house, which can be tricky because it's again a Madaka, but the ruler of the 1st house always, almost, I can't think of an occasion where it's bad to strengthen the ruler of your ascendant. Maybe if it's Aquarius and Saturn also rules your 12th. I don't know. This you'll have to talk to about. This is all, debatable, and I try to avoid debates. Oh, and here's a beautiful little kitty cat who just wandered by, and he's looking for food. So, cats represent what? Well, as pets, you can say they represent Mercury, planet Mercury, as your sort of personal. But they're also very sensual animals, and they can represent Venus as well, which is why a lot of single people have cats, because they fill the role of Venus in the life. So on this theme of working with animals, in some of my other classes, I've recommended feeding different kinds of animals. But the principle, and not to get into that direction, the principle is this: strengthen the ruler of the particular house. So, or if you have, say, Ketu in the 7th house, then, make friends with Ganesha. Make friends with that planet. Ketu can represent Ganesha. And Ganesha is the removal of obstacles. And as MC Yogi says, Ganesh is fresh, right? So get into that spirit of hanging with Ganesh, or whatever Ganesh is. If you're not, Hindu, Ketu can represent aspects of the fierce feminine divine. Ketu represents, the playful mystic, the whirling dervish. Making friends with that mysterious part of you that can transcend any obstacle is a remedy for a relationship in this instance. So again, remediation for this is possible. The first step is self-awareness, knowing that there is a problem, knowing that there is a handicap. And this was an eye-opener for me, and I hope it's an eye-opener for you. If you have any other questions, stay tuned or put your comments below. If you want to join us for the Compatibility Protocol webinar, it's happening as I speak tonight. But if you missed it, go to cosmicinsights.com. You'll see the class there, and there'll be an opportunity to join the full compatibility protocol. All right, that's enough for me. We'll see you soon. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments below. Take care. Bye.